friends of the forest, Dandelion here with Centehua Sage.
Hi.
And we're foraging the farmstead, looking around, discussing some plant medicine magic and good things. So, should we go look at Horehound real quick? We've kind of had a Horehound day, which is kind of fun because nobody knows where that name comes from. Also, here is Dennis Sharmad, close to the area here in San Diego County, helped me identify actually mallow sprouts, and so funny.
Wow.
Because there's such a thing called wild microgreens, and they actually grow themselves. And so we would never think necessarily to cultivate these or like to be wild harvesters of mallow microgreens. They're beautiful and delicious, and very full of nutrition, and they don't have as nutty or loud of a flavor as the larger mallow leaves, but they're really good when they're cooked too. So Malva neglecta is here, and then the giant mallow. They're all over the place, edible green. We've been eating them actually. We even roasted them. Remember? We sauteed those. And so, would you like to share a little bit about Horehound? Should I talk the botanical nonsense first?
Yes.
So, mint family, square stem, opposite leaves, and not currently in flower, but a really good time to harvest Horehound. So you could just pinch off the tops like this. I made a medicinal honey. It's really going to be great for respiratory infections, coughs, colds, and since it's extremely bitter, it'll be nice infused in honey.
So it's interesting, of course, obvious that you say that, because my experience with Horehound was meeting this beautiful being while I was really processing some of my father wounds. So I went for a walk and was just really, this stuff was coming up, and I knew I needed to find forgiveness and to breathe, and I couldn't breathe. I had a cough for about 2 weeks, and my heart felt very heavy, and so it was all this area that felt so constricted. And so I was walking around and crying and feeling into what I needed and calling for it, and I just looked around and it was so dry, and I couldn't find any medicine, and I just was feeling like a little lost girl. And suddenly I looked down and there was a small patch of Horehound, and I just knelt like this and started observing this plant and started to cry and started to take deeper breaths, and suddenly I could feel my heart and felt this protective energy, and I felt just very sensitive. And then I brought Horehound home, and I've never really experienced anything with this plant. This was our first meeting, our first encounter, and I felt so supported, so strong. It feels so strong. It's even the leaves are a little coarser and thick. You know, it's not like a flimsy plant.
Yeah, it's kind of leathery.
Yeah, exactly. And it's got like a musky, almost masculine scent.
It's true.
And so, yeah, when I came home and then researched the chemistry and realized it was going to help calm my heart and breathe, I also made a honey syrup, and we started engaging in a relationship and started to actively forgive. And then my friend also, I introduced her to Horehound, and I didn't say anything. I didn't tell her my story, and the first thing she says is, "Oh, it smells like my grandfather." And it was just so obvious that, you know, it's amazing when you have this like similar experience of feeling like a father energy.
Yeah.
So
not necessarily something that's going to be in an herbal book.
No.
But comes out, connection. And then actually somebody, through no other coincidence than our video, on Instagram, was like, "Oh, that's so interesting because Horehound reminds me of my father." Too, and I never really got that connection energetically, but when I smell it, it does have this sort of really musk-like smell. So it's very unique for a mint family plant. Absolutely bitter, really hard to eat, but one leaf of this will get your digestive system definitely stimulated. In vinegar would also be helpful. So now's kind of a good time to harvest it.
Doesn't Horehound also come from Horus? the eye
I don't
of
know,
Ra.
but that makes sense.
That's what I also came across, and yeah, that made a lot of sense as well, and like speech,
Yeah.
you know, communication.
So Horus is the son of Osiris and Isis.
Yeah,
And so
the eye of Ra.
Isis was basically had to gather up pieces of Osiris. Yeah, that's his name. And he was chopped apart somehow, and she had to gather up his body parts, and she like couldn't find his phallus or something like that. And I forget how the story goes after that. But then Osiris is the son of Isis. Sorry, Horus is the son of Isis and Osiris, and in a way, it's very like Shiva, Shakti, and Ganesh. And so Horus has a lot of common sort of metaphors that Ganesh does. His head was replaced with the head of an animal. So Horus has the hawk head, and Ganesh has the elephant head.
It's like such a beautiful geometry, like the star.
Yeah.
It's lovely.
So the eye of Horus. So what does that represent, sort of, in Egyptian mythology?
Well, I feel like it's part of the consciousness of the sun, the all-seeing eye.
Yeah.
The sun that floods our consciousness with light.
Yeah, the inner eye,
Yeah,
the third eye.
It's to me, it is the Father,
That one.
the celestial.
Yeah, the masculine, solar, original solar deity. You know, he, and then the earth is she. You know, and that was basically the way people saw reality.
Yeah, which
Sky
is interesting that the
and
way we're talking
earth.
about it is like you're bringing the masculine, like very, you know, the technical aspects, the scientific aspects, and
You're bringing all the feminine.
and I just,
intuitive.
you know, I just felt it.
Yeah.
I just felt him.
Yeah. But that's like an underlying pattern under herbalism, which, you know, we loosely call the doctrine of signatures, which is kind of when you tap in and you quest. And I hear in your story like how your respiratory system felt grief and you had sadness, and in a way we could also say that grief and sadness cause respiratory infections, and so opening up that grief place definitely helps us. And you can even do that by meditating with a leaf on your heart. Sniffing it is also medicine, so very important to understand the other aspects, and thanks for bringing that to the community. I'm go check out someone else. You want to go to Moringa?
Yeah.
Also, I just want to jokingly, so obviously the castor plant is definitely very prevalent in Southern California, and of course it all comes down basically to either compost or shit. So we've been talking a lot about that as far as the community and dealing with shit, and that actually is like the number one thing in the eco-village system, is like, what are we going to do with all of our poop? And as soon as you figure that out, then you can actually have like basically an eco-village community, and you could always trek in water, you know what I mean? But you can't always just like shit all over the place on your homestead. So and that's sort of a metaphor for you know, the constipated psychology of our society and those kind of things. So obviously with castor, we have a great fear of working with castor as a medicine because it's a laxative, and that scares most people. So just because it's a laxative does not mean it's poisonous. That's a very different thing. But castor is you know, able to help people purge. So for constipation, for example, there's the best hummingbird shot in the whole world. If only we didn't have an iPhone. I don't know if y'all caught that, but that was a beautiful. So castor is definitely, you compress the oil, it's very good for the skin, it's a little sticky, and it's also helpful for massage. It's really good for also pulling toxins out of the body, so people put it on their feet, warm cloth on top of it, or on your kidney area. Be careful, obviously. And then drink it only under extreme cases. But it's everywhere, and it's really beautiful. It is an oil source. White sage, Salvia apiana, one of our superheroes. That's all you have to do. Aaron says, what potentials do you see for integrating Humanor into school systems or prison systems? That would be amazing. I would say we should start not with industrial level, but actually with local level, in the sense of, imagine if there was a modular kit that people could have and buy, that they could just plug into their existing bathrooms. So maybe that's what we really want to do, is start building our own personal houses with composting toilets. The idea of doing it on a large scale obviously should be just second. Like once everybody gets comfortable with the idea, then it can totally happen. There's no reason why it shouldn't, but if we say like, oh well, we can shit in porcelain potties and flush it down into fresh drinking water, but people in jail can't, or people in school can't, then it ends up being this sort of what about me back and forth, you know. So white sage is amazing, highly resinous, good for the respiratory system, intestinal infections, I mean basically anything, and also lungs, as I mentioned, I think, and mouth, gums, anything like that. This is really the only region that white sage grows endemic. So this is what you buy at the store, you know, for your smudge bundles. And here we have the magical. Tell us a little bit about Moringa.
I love Moringa. So off the charts on a nutritional level, such a nourishing plant. And again, I'm coming from the energetics, the essence of Moringa, and so for me, she really feels like a mother, and kind of like an Italian mother. She's just like, eat more, manja, like every part of her is edible and medicinal, and so I just feel she's nurturing. She's so nurturing and soft and sweet, but she is a little spicy, you know. They call her Horehound, horseradish tree. So, you know, mamas need to have their spice.
Yeah, and so the greens are edible and good, the flowers are pretty good. These actually, the seeds are edible. The really cool thing is actually when they're young and green, they're cooked in South Indian food, so it's also called drumstick, which is really cool because I learned that basically India is completely hip to Moringa.
Oh, yeah.
They just call it drumstick, and actually somebody from Calcutta today on Instagram told me how they prepare a traditional curry dish with Moringa greens.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So
here's the seeds, and they clarify water. A lot of people say it purifies water, but it doesn't. It just helps all the sediments drop, and so that's what they do. And they also, it's a great party trick to eat the seed and then drink water, and the water tastes like you dumped 3 tablespoons of stevia or something. Like it's sugar water afterwards. So it's great for diabetics. You could sweeten it. It's kind of tricking the taste buds into feeling everything is sweet.
you could also soak it and then drink the water, right?
Yeah.
That's what people say. They are very bitter on their own. They do probably contain a lot of vitamins, minerals. If anybody hasn't seen on my Instagram page, I wrote about Moringa. It's also on Return to Nature Skills page on Instagram, Facebook. So
also, they are fast growing, so really such a hero plant for places where there's malnutrition, because in one season you get food, like you know, 6 months and you've got food. So, and it also looks like the plant emoji. It's actually a Moringa. Have you seen it? It's this.
Oh, the conspiracies have been unlocked.
This is the plant,
Theft.
folks.
Yeah, so you get the drumsticks, the seeds, really big seeds. Pea family, Fabaceae. And then when they're young and green, they're totally an edible vegetable. If you've ever had Indian sambar, they're in there. What else do we check out? Yeah, let's see that. So the fun thing about Southern California is fennel grows everywhere. It's totally a weed. Of course, it only is valuable if it's on the East Coast. In other words, that wherever it isn't growing is where people value it. So obviously this is an edible green vegetable. Really licorice-like taste, very good cooling and also antimicrobial. So that's a really cool effect. You don't always get that. Most antimicrobials are heating, you know, in nature. So these have aromatic oils, but they're more of a cooling flavor than a heating flavor. Aaron actually says about Moringa tolerates drought and heat. I think, right. Super drought tolerant, super heat tolerant.
It's subtropical, but right.
Yeah, it's a really
resilient
plant. So fennel is really good. Obviously the signature of the lungs. So this is good for heat. So fever and mucus, right? It's also really good for increasing basically fluid through the body. So if you have anything from delayed menses to lack of milk production to even joints, lubrication in joints. Fennel can really help with that. The seeds are edible, really good in tea. I definitely combine them in all kinds of teas. The greens are wonderful. Add them to stir fries, eggs, whatever it is. And then the roots, when they're young, I guess they're not really the roots, but like these little shoots. But it's hard to get fennel, a lot of fennel recipes as far as getting it to taste like.
I like them raw, like in salads, a little lemon.
Yeah.
And it's I find it so interesting. The plants that I'm drawn to are usually cooling or mucilaginous, and my makeup is choleric and fiery.
Yeah.
So.
That's good. She's practicing Ayurveda. That means you do the opposite, not the same. So if you're really, really fiery, you don't want to eat all the chilies, and you don't want to eat all the hot sauce and all that stuff. You want to eat cooling. So seriously, fennel, fenugreek for milk production. It's like, so I often have women ask me about reishi mushroom, and they're like, it kind of dries up breast milk. And the really interesting thing, I'm like, whatever benefits you get from reishi is probably so much better. And if you have a risk of drying up breast milk, just go with fennel, greens, and tea, etc. The seeds as tea, and then also fenugreek. You soak it overnight and then eat 1 to 2 teaspoons a day. You get fenugreek sprouts, and they're slimy. So those are said to be extremely good for also shukra, or seminal fluid, in the Ayurvedic tradition. So they're really, again, like the idea in Ayurveda is that your food becomes your life force, and there are sheaths between the food becoming your life force, and those are called the datus. And so there's like the bone, marrow, fat, etc. And so when you get to marrow is where you build your immune resilience. So the previous dhatu has to fill for the next one to be filled. So that's why they talk about, like, amma, if there's toxins in the system, you can't get rasayans or adaptogens into your system because it's going to burn up at level 1. So there's basically 7 tissue levels, and you fill the one, and then the next is filled, and fill the next, and the next is filled, and it ultimately goes to immune fluid, and that ends up being your bone marrow. And after your bone marrow is built, then your excess is your shukra, or I forget what they call it, and that's like your seminal fluid, your literal life force that you offer. And then obviously the idea is if you retract that and you work with that, it becomes ojas. And so rasayan, or rasa ayana, nectar increasing, right, are like shatavari, ashwagandha, shilajit, all those deep tissue nourishers. We kind of categorize them in a lump as now adaptogens. But there's like some are adaptogens, but in Ayurveda that tradition is kind of like rasayan, or the nectar increasers, increasing basically your auric power, your immune resilience. And that's what we see as like your immune system. So we have physiological particles in our bodies, but then we also have this kind of larger energetic system. Obviously, you feel good and bad vibes, whether you pretend you don't or not. And then also there's electromagnetic energies that are crossing through everything. Power lines, but also thoughts, Pepper, cheese, and chemtrails. One is organic, the other is not. Yeah, cotton is a really cool plant. So this is straight up cotton. Changed the face of America for sure. Cotton trade, all of our shirts, clothing, etc. They now have it mechanized. But this is in here a history of slavery and the way that we monocultured fields to produce cotton for clothing, etc., which we all really value. Aaron says, does all that also apply to other adaptogens like tulsi? In the case of tulsi, yes. Not all rasayana are adaptogens, but all adaptogens, not all adaptogens, let's get this, not all rasayan, according to Ayurveda, are known as adaptogens, but all of the rasayan in Ayurveda are adaptogenic. So then there are herbs like Schisandra, which is known as an adaptogen. may not have been seen as a rasayan in the Ayurvedic tradition. It doesn't really come from there, although there is probably some research and history in the Ayurvedic text. There's also, let's see, trying to think of other adaptogenic herbs that may or may not be. You know, if the sages of India got a hold of maca, would they see it as a rasayan? Maca is from South America.
Yeah.
Who knows? Probably the answer is yes. And then the question is, of course, what are the properties of a rasayan? That's a great thing.
It's so beautiful.
So, where can people find you, Centi? What are your sites? Look, lightheaded. You're getting lightheaded.
I'm on Instagram, Centehua Sage, and I have a Facebook, Lunar Rhythm and Garden Gatherings.
San Diego people, a lot of good permaculture people, sustainability building here. So if you're in the area, get in touch on Dandelion, returntonature.us. See y'all soon.